available to us is on. Available to us is
La gente se está conectando.
Are you in Toronto right now or in some other part of the world?
I'm looking at Toronto. I actually live about 50 kilometers south of it. The opposite side of Lake Ontario.
Yeah, I looked at it on the map when I saw your address on LinkedIn. So Niagara on the Lake was the name of the town?
It's one of our wine countries. So it's close to Niagara Falls, the big tourist trap, but we live actually in wine country.
Yeah, and it's mostly iced wine. So do you have other?
We have year-round wine, but the thing it's famous for is the ice wine.
Ice wine, yeah. You have the opportunity to taste that. Very nice. So you should come and try Chilean wines.
Well, we almost did get to come before the pandemic,
yes,
right?
That's almost true. Yeah, that was what May 2020. We were expecting you here.
Yeah. But certainly my travel schedule has been restored to normal. So.
Yeah, I feel the same, and I don't know if that's good or bad.
Well, I found that starting new things is almost impossible. Like Zoom is really good for communication and things that are already well established, but making the connections, you really have to do in person, right? If you and I had not met in lots of different things, then we wouldn't be doing this talk today. So
yes, that's true.
Zoom itself is not enough. How long have we been trying to get this organized? 6 months?
I was looking back at the emails, probably like a year and a half, but we've had some changes on our end too. So I'm glad that it finally came into place.
Is all of Chile one time zone? You're on mute.
Sorry, just realized I was on mute. So Easter Island is on another time zone, probably close to your Pacific time. And then Punta Arenas, which is in the southernmost tip, they don't do daylight savings time. So they're like 6 months of the year that we're off by, I can't remember if it's half hour or a full hour. And then our Antarctica, to be honest, I have no idea. But yeah, you're not. Are you on EST? You're in Eastern?
Yeah,
no.
Same as you, right?
Okay, so we're same time.
Okay,
so we'll wait for Juan to get us started, and there you go.
mi perfil de video de digo para que me entiendan, no sé, como solicitudes de revisión de manuscritos. Y no hay ninguna teoría.
¿Por atrás? ¿Me andas atrás nomás?
Y significa mucho. Bien, pedir, hacer una.
Bueno, muchas gracias a todos por venir y por conectarse online a esta nueva sesión de nuestros seminarios académicos de la Facultad de Medicina y del ICIM, del Instituto de Ciencias e Innovación en Medicina de la Universidad del Desarrollo. Hoy tenemos un invitado tremendamente relevante, es un agrado tenerlo aquí y para conceder los créditos donde se merecen es un invitado que propuso Gabriela, que lo conoce hace tiempo, así que Gabriela, repito, la palabra, el escenario virtual es todo tuyo. Dale nomás. Muchas gracias.
Súper, muchas gracias. Bienvenidas y bienvenidos a esta sesión. So I'll switch to English. We're super honored to have Peter Goodhand joining us for our academic seminars today at the Universidad del Desarrollo School of Medicine. I will do a brief introduction. Peter has a very extensive CV, but I don't want to take up the time from his presentation. So let me just, I'll share a single slide while I tell you about him. And can you see that okay? So Peter Goodhand is the Chief Executive Officer of the Global Alliance for Genomics in Health. He's based in close to Toronto, Canada, and he is a leader in the global health sector, and he's held senior executive and board membership positions in the health research advancement community. As I said, he's the current CEO of the Global Alliance of Genomics for Genomics in Health, and he'll be telling us a lot about that today. But just to summarize, this is a policy framing and technical standard setting organization, which is seeking to enable responsible genomic and other data sharing within a human rights framework. Peter previously served as the president of the Ontario Institute for Cancer Research and also the Canadian Cancer Society. I saw, looking around, an award as a Canadian of the Year for your charitable work in these organizations. And he's had a 20-year career in the global medical technology industry, including really relevant roles in strategic leadership within multinational health companies such as Health Technology Exchange. He's also the current co-chair of the 100,000 Cohorts Consortium and serves in the governance board of RareX and other international and national advisory bodies. And he's also close to the rare diseases community, as he has had a almost 15-year experience as a patient advocate, caregiver, and also navigator through his family's battle with rare cancer. So again, we're really happy that we'll have the luxury to listen to your presentation and inspire us to take some of our work even further. Thank you.
Gabriela, many thanks. I often kind of just do a sound check that I'm coming through. Good?
Yes. Perfect. Yes.
Yes, okay. Perfect. Sound and slide.
Okay, great. I often have to start my international talks with good morning, good afternoon, good evening. And so it's a rare privilege to be on the same time zone as a group in such a different part of the world. So it's a great honor and privilege. And I'm really glad we made this happen after over a year of trying to get organized. So the talk is the why and the how. Most of this will be about the how, but I just thought I'd start with a few on the why and what really has made genomic data sharing possible. So you all know the background of the Human Genome Project and the major projects that came beyond it. 20 years ago, it was incredibly expensive and needed the whole world to mobilize to try and do it together. But as the change in technology and mostly the change in the cost of genome sequencing has happened in the last 20 years, It's democratized genomics. And that has meant that we're generating more genomic data than ever. But at the same time, if we don't find ways to share it, it really will just be more noise. It won't help us move forward. So today we track over 200 genomic data sharing initiatives that are in the fields of clinical genomic medicine research, national initiatives, cohort research. Some of them overlap and they move into more than one category, but the bottom line, hundreds of genomic data sharing initiatives. Some really solid reasons as to why we would share data. Can demonstrate, particularly in things like rare disease, can demonstrate patterns in health and disease that we wouldn't see by looking only at one population or one small group. We can have more significant analysis, we can get better variant interpretations, accurate diagnosis, and advanced precision medicine. Although I think in many parts of the world, rather than precision medicine, we might be talking about the benefits of public health impacts of genomics. Since the data is distributed globally, though, we need interoperable standards to answer those research questions. I don't think any one country, when it comes to genomics, can act alone, although that might be the start point for many countries, is to start sharing data locally and then expand globally. So my talk today really will be about, that's the big picture of the why. I'll get more in details as we go, but the outline of my presentation is here. We'll talk about GA4GH itself, the importance of standards. We'll introduce the concept of federated data sharing, or at least expand on it if you're already aware of it. Talk about some of the other global initiatives, and then just end with a call to get involved. So about GA4GH. GA4GH really is a 21st century organization. It started as a community coming together, and we think of ourselves as a global forum. We launched in 2013, so we've been doing this for 10 years. Important thing about the mission statement, this was never about bigger or better or faster genomic research. It was about turning that the knowledge coming from genomic research and moving it in a way that it can impact human health. As we've gone on over those 10 years, the way we do this and the opportunities ahead have changed, but the essential mission has remained the same: maximizing, realizing the promise of genomics for human health. You can see if this plays. And in the room, can you give me feedback if we get the sound to work this time?
Durante la próxima década, se espera que se secuencien los genomas de decenas de millones de personas con fines de salud. Este cúmulo de información tiene el potencial de transformar la medicina genómica y acelerar la investigación biomédica, pero solo si se puede estudiar a nivel mundial. Los datos suelen almacenarse de modo aislado por disciplina, institución y país. A causa de la falta de estándares para recopilar, almacenar y consultar datos, la colaboración entre comunidades es un desafío. ¿La solución? La Alianza Global para la Genómica y la Salud. La GA4GH se fundó en 2013 para facilitar el intercambio responsable y seguro de datos genómicos a través de campos, plataformas y fronteras. Juntos, podremos comprender mejor el genoma humano y tratar enfermedades que de otro modo serían intratables. Con base en la Declaración Universal de los Derechos Humanos, GA4GH activa el derecho de las personas a compartir los beneficios de la ciencia genómica. Para lograr nuestra misión, GA4GH reúne a una comunidad global de investigadores, desarrolladores de software, proveedores de salud, legisladores y defensores del paciente. Una red diversa de colaboradores que reconocen el valor de intercambiar datos genómicos para el beneficio de la salud humana y la medicina. Nuestra comunidad se ha organizado en 8 grupos de trabajo que desarrollan y mantienen los estándares y las políticas necesarios para describir, descubrir, almacenar, consultar, transferir y proteger los datos genómicos de modo que promueva la ciencia abierta. Cada grupo se basa en aportes de los proyectos promotores, que asocian nuestro trabajo a las necesidades del mundo real. Desarrollados por y para la comunidad de genómica. Los estándares GA4GH permitirán un ecosistema de datos y herramientas que trascenderán los sistemas aislados y acelerarán el progreso científico en salud humana y medicina.
I hope that all came through clearly. I said about our mission, the way we do this, enabling the international data sharing across that translational continuum. So increasingly over the last 10 years, it's about not just sharing research data, but into healthcare and back again. That has pushed us towards a federated approach, and I'll come back to that later. But if there's one thing that GFGH has focused on from the beginning, it's interoperability. It doesn't mean making everybody the same all the time, but it's ensuring that there's interoperability. We do that in a variety of ways, as you can see on the right-hand side. As I said in the video, from the beginning, we've been influenced by this framework for responsible sharing of genomics and health-related data, grounded in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and with this, the right to science, the right of humans to benefit from science, and the right of scientists and others to benefit from their work. It's been translated by now into 14 languages, and it is a foundational aspect of the Global Alliance. And I'll come back a little bit more on that later. This is our ecosystem and our outputs. We got over 500 organizational members, about half of which are companies. And so this is fairly unique for an organization that came out of academic environments, in that half our members are actually industry rather than research institutes, universities, and hospitals. And that is critical when it comes to standards development, because we need the whole community supporting the standards, not just one group or another. We would love to be more global than we are. It's relative, as you know, the world is not equally balanced, and so finding ways to increase participation is a huge aspect of our next decade. The first decade was building the organization and doing a reasonable job of being global. I think moving forward, we'll put more and more emphasis into total global engagement. We have about 450 active participants drawn from many parts of both active in our workstreams, our driver projects. There are 8 of those workstreams. There are 24 driver projects, soon to be 30. We produced over 30 technical standards, 20 regulatory protocols and policies, and we really are driving towards enabling a global health. This is our organization and funding. The vast majority of our funding comes from national level or international funding agencies in Canada, the US, and the UK. And then we have host institutes that actually employ the staff in each of those countries. So in Canada, our primary host institute is where I work at the Ontario Institute for Cancer Research, but we also have staff at the Broad Institute in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and at Sanger and Emble EBI on the Hinxton Genome Campus in the UK. We also have the not-for-profit, and that does the things that only a legal entity can do in the name of GA4GH. Things around making sure IP stays open and free, and forming formal agreements and relationships with things like WHO or UNESCO. This is a schematic on how we work. We got on the left-hand side the 6 technical and the 2 foundational work streams. That's our output, that's our engine. That's where the work of GA4GH is produced. But we don't ourselves have any data. We don't generate data. We don't do research. But we didn't want to be a standards development organization that was just producing theoretical standards. We wanted to make sure that they were relevant and rigorously tested in the real world. And for that, we rely on our driver projects. So a combination, work streams, real world driver projects, not everybody working on everything, but hopefully enough of a cross-section that well-informed major projects need these standards and can help introduce them. These are the work streams. These work streams are open to anyone. You don't have to be part of a driver project. The only real qualification is interest and some level of expertise, and anyone who brings that to these work streams will be most welcome. These are the driver projects as they exist today. A few of them will be dropping off in this year, maybe 3 or 4 will have come to the end of their funding cycle or their project. And so we recently did a call for new driver projects, and that is just closed. And a big part of the new driver projects is to extend that global geographic footprint, really push the interoperability, get closer to healthcare, and find people who've got the capacity to really contribute to GA4GH. We've got the applications are currently under review by an external committee, and they'll be recommended to our executive. In 2020, we had a look at everything we've been doing for the last few years and said, what are the strategic imperatives? Where do we need to take this organization over the next 3-4 years? We just verified last year that these were still relevant. And so emphasis for us is interoperability between the standards and between other standards. Implementation support, making sure that these standards are can be quickly adopted, that they're easy and consistently able to be implemented by a wide cross-section. And so more emphasis on implementation support. And finally, a big thrust for us is to get closer and closer to healthcare. Even though we're coming from the large-scale genomic research environment, push ourselves to engage with and become part of health implementation. To do that, we found that 6 of our driver projects were actually recognized as national initiatives. They've been launched by the governments, they got a national mandate or scope, or they were multifaceted consortia that were looking to do the same kind of work. So we formed this as a forum for members, and then out beyond GA4GH, we reached out to other groups that are forming national initiatives. And this group, as with others, is more focused on implementation. So this is not really where we develop the standard, but this is how we implement them, and particularly closer to healthcare. We have some communities of interest. So within our driver projects, about 11 of them have got cancer in their mandate. At least 6, probably more, have got rare disease in their mandate. And recently, for the last few years, there's been a tremendous emphasis on infectious disease. This is an example of one of our communities. It's the cancer community. And they're really looking for themes and ideas that cut across the individual driver projects and say, this is something that those of us with an emphasis on cancer feel there is a need to do collaboratively rather than one by one. And therefore, can GA4GH help develop a standard protocol framework that will enable us to do that? So some real world use cases. But as you all know, we've just lived through and different impact on different countries. Probably the most significant event in the last 20 years for sure, in a global pandemic of COVID-19. On the positive side, if you can draw positives from such a terrible global event, it has massively raised the profile of genomics. It has raised the need to share data in a timely fashion, in a responsible fashion. And I think if we can leverage the global awareness and commitment to better data sharing and linking human data to pathogen data, we can definitely approach a large cohort of global genomes that will have an impact for not only infectious disease, but other disease conditions in which genomics has a significant component. We were supported in doing this by the Canadian Institute for Health Research, who pushed us and gave us some funding to start a infectious disease community and bring together these groups both within Canada and internationally to find better ways of supporting this. We're doing that with the Public Health Alliance for Genomic Epidemiology and with other international groups. So as we bring the experience from human genome work, we want to make sure that we're partnering with organizations that have got much greater understanding of pathogen genomes. So that's about GFJ, how we work. I'm now going to move into standards development and interoperability. Some core principles, just repeating them: enable international data sharing, share across the continuum, look at federated approaches, promote interoperability. Interoperability is absolutely key to data sharing. We want to make sure that we're following some basic principles like the FAIR principles, but it's not just about interoperable data sharing. We want to think about how you can compute interoperably. So for that, we need tools and data access methods. What makes a good standard? It's clear and it's specific. It's easy to adopt. It works as part of a broader system, and it meets the needs of stakeholders. It can support some common use cases, global common use case patterns, work with real projects and data custodians. I didn't realize that word was still in this slide. In the last few years, I've really switched from using data custodians, people who protect data, into using the word data stewards, and stewards with that responsibility for making sure the data is protected, but also that it is used and it's used responsibly. So I like the word data steward because it's a more positive, engaging word than just custodians. So we want our use cases from many sources. We develop the standards, we put them into practice, and then we bring them back. So for some of our standards, we're moving towards version 4.0. Some are still at version 1.0. But this real world testing and improvement is critical. These are, it's an overview. I'm not going to go through all of these standards. I just wanted to get a sense that from those work streams come individual standards, suites of standards. Some of those may be completely new to you, like passports or data use ontologies. But I'm sure that if you're in the field of genomics, then things like SAM, BAM, CRAM, VCF, BED are formats that you've been using for several years, and those are now stewarded by GFGH. I'm going to just focus on two of the work streams that are particularly relevant when it comes to moving closer to healthcare. We found over the last 10 years that, relatively speaking, the genotypic information is standard and it's simple. Understanding it is really complex. To understand that genotype, that genomic information, we need the clinical and the phenotypic information. And that is a huge challenge because it's diverse, it's typically in different languages, different abbreviations, stored in electronic health records or on paper. And so the whole concept of making sure that the genomic information is seen alongside phenotypic information in an ordered, structured way. So being a technical group, we find ways to in a computable form, represent things like pedigree, but also phenotypic information. Approved a couple of years ago, our PhenoPacket standard does exactly what I just said. So if you think about the file formats over on the genome side, on the phenotype side, PhenoPackets is the equivalent. And it's the first thing that we've moved from being just a GFGH standard into also being an ISO standard. In our regulatory and ethics work stream, I said right at the beginning, we were led by Bartha Knoppers from McGill University. We were very much about this right to science and right to recognition and grounding it in human rights. The other thing that Bartha and others brought to us is it's about balance. And so typically, if the emphasis was on protect from harm, and so don't share the data in many, many situations because of a potential harm. On the flip side, the reverse, we know there is absolute harm from not sharing the data in a responsible way. So from the beginning, we've been focused on balancing the benefits of sharing with the harm of sharing, and recognizing it's, in many cases, the harm is theoretical and potential from sharing inappropriately, but there is absolutely harm done by not sharing when we can, and again, particularly in areas like rare disease or cancer or a pandemic. This is just a poster, I think this was, of some of the work they've done. From that overarching framework for responsible sharing and genomic health-related data, it has since dropped down into individual tools and concepts that live underneath that. We also have a couple of things that are not actually outputs, but they are ongoing activities, and that's our GDPR forum, which does regular updates on GDPR as a piece of privacy legislation, our genetic discrimination group, and also our public attitudes on genomic policy. So some of these result in a white paper or a policy paper, others are ongoing. But certainly we are trying to now make sure that we're looking at both the clinical and the research aspects of regulatory and ethics. Just a couple of schematics coming up, this one from Australia, on the way these standards can look in a large program. They're not the only standards that will be needed, but obviously here we focused on the GFJ standards. This is the way Australian Genomics has done it at scale across their very ambitious project. Here's the way it's represented inside the H3 Africa genomic research ecosystem. And although the first of those, the Australian one, was done in a clinical environment, and as you can see, this one also includes clinical data, they still have been very significant research projects. What we see increasingly is the concept of a learning health system, of research, of knowledge flowing into healthcare, new knowledge being generated, and then back into research. So rather than just a linear movement from left to right across the translational continuum, from basic research to clinical practice, we now see this concept of a learning health system in which there is an exchange of knowledge into practice, new knowledge, and the cycle continues. We're not, as I said, we're not the only standards organization. We've tried to make sure that the global commitment or the awareness of the FAIR standards on findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable is something to which we map our GFJ standards. It doesn't mean they're fully FAIR compliant according to the rule book, but certainly we can say that this is the way GFJ standards fulfill the FAIR philosophy. Closer we get to healthcare, though, it is not just about GFJ. We cannot do this alone. We have to make sure that our standards align with and complement or map to things like ISO, HL7, HL7 Fire, SNOMED, CDISC. And so there's part of our growing up as an organization is how we relate to and work with others. Let's switch topics a little bit away from the standards and talk about something that we've seen as an increasingly a choice, a preference for people doing genomic data sharing at scale for a few reasons. And that is the concept of federated data sharing and leaving the data in place. So I'll just expand on those two concepts. So there's different approaches. You can build centralized genomic knowledge bases. One of the best accomplishments of GFJ is helping to build the BRCA exchange, which today is probably the world's best repository of knowledge about the impact, the pathogenicity of variants in BRCA1 and 2. And so it's knowledge, it's not identifying a patient, and it's available to any of us online, over our phone, the BRCA exchange. So sometimes bring the knowledge into it. Others put it in a data commons, leave the data in a very secure environment. It may have multiple data sets within that same environment. This will be similar to a concept that others refer to as a trusted research environment or a secure data environment. But the idea of build a modern, well-managed, well-protected data commons that allows you to do research within it. Sometimes you can link those in a very deliberate way with a hub and spoke type federation. So a group, let's say all the hospitals in Chile come together and say we're part of this planned, very deliberate federation. But the other concept, maybe you need to do some research that includes new collaborators in different countries, but you want to do it in a federated way as opposed to having to go and ask the same question over and over and over again. So there is a paradigm shift when it comes to genomic data sharing from the original concept of get permission, get access, copy the data to your local environment, and then do all the work with it locally, to a more recent concept of data visiting. Somebody builds that trusted research environment, you get permission and credentials to go and visit that data, and then do your research on it. And if you can do multiple visits at the same time, that's federation. So federation allows us to move the analysis to the data, not the other way around, have reciprocal data access methods. It's very relevant as the data gets closer to healthcare, because typically there are more rules and regulations about where health data can go. And so it's not the only solution. I don't want to say everything is moving to federation, but it certainly is a thrust for many people doing genomic data at scale. And partly as the data sets get bigger and bigger, it is very inefficient to move large petabytes of data around the world as opposed to sending the question to the data. So we've, just as we had the introductory video, we now have one, and I'm going to see if I can show you the federated data sharing video.
University Hospital es un líder mundial en la investigación del cáncer. Ana es miembro del cuerpo docente de UH, donde dirige un equipo que estudia enfermedades mortales causadas por patógenos. Como a muchos colegas, a Ana le gustaría trabajar con más datos de todo el mundo para poder analizar los datos genómicos y de salud de la mayor cantidad posible de pacientes, y así identificar variantes genéticas asociadas con mejores resultados y orientar mejores tratamientos clínicos. A la vez, UH e instituciones similares quieren poner sus colecciones de datos a disposición de investigadores como Ana, pero sin métodos interoperables para que los investigadores identifiquen, consulten y analicen con eficiencia los datos que les interesan, resulta imposible. Por el momento, al equipo de Ana le es sencillo interrogar los datos locales de UH, pero trabajar con series de datos globales es un desafío. Sin cohortes numerosas e interoperables, la significancia estadística de sus resultados es baja y limita sus posibilidades de avance en el campo. Pero no tiene que ser así. Un conjunto de herramientas de software que implementa los estándares de GA4-GH puede conectar a investigadores como Ana a una red global de datos para liberar su potencial de forma segura y responsable en beneficio de la salud humana. Gracias a las Discovery API de GA4-GH, los administradores de datos pueden facilitar la localización de sus series. Ana puede consultar esta red enorme para identificar series de datos relevantes para su estudio. Para cada conjunto de datos que quiere analizar, Ana trabaja con un comité de acceso a datos para obtener el permiso. Los estándares de GA4-GH ayudan a que estos grupos determinen de modo fiable si la propuesta de Ana está dentro del alcance acordado por los donantes de datos. Las solicitudes aprobadas se añaden a su identidad virtual y ahora ella puede comenzar a trabajar con los datos. Con las Cloud API de GA4-GH, el laboratorio de Ana se transforma en un centro virtual que la conecta con todos los datos necesarios para hacer bien su trabajo, aunque instruirá al software para que haga gran parte de ese trabajo por ella. Ana le dice a cada máquina a dónde ir, qué datos analizar y qué herramienta de análisis usar. Dotadas de estas instrucciones, las máquinas de software se ponen en marcha para analizar una parte de los datos justo donde se encuentran. Las máquinas solo pueden acceder a los datos si tienen autorización. Y pueden ejecutar las instrucciones de Ana gracias a que la institución ha empaquetado sus datos de un modo universal de acuerdo con los estándares de la nube de GA4-GH. Cada máquina aporta el resultado de su análisis para incorporarlo al estudio de Ana. Como medida de seguridad, el administrador de datos puede eliminar el acceso desde las máquinas con software de Ana una vez que se complete el análisis. El equipo de Ana reúne las piezas para revelar una variante genética asociada con mejores resultados. Una nueva perspectiva que jamás habrían visto si los conjuntos de datos no fueran interoperables. Ana es solo una investigadora, pero su historia no es la única. Esperamos que algún día todos los investigadores del mundo puedan acceder a una red global de datos desde la comodidad de su laboratorio y revelar conocimientos ocultos sobre la salud y las enfermedades humanas.
So I hope that really brought home the potential, the aspiration. That is a future state. What we just saw in that video is not where we're at today. It will take years, and it will take building trust and value and commitment and resources to ever get to that point of sharing to that degree internationally on a regular basis. But if that concept of federated data sharing can be done between trusted partners inside Chile, inside Latin America, with partner organizations in different countries, then we're starting to achieve that vision. So I am not promoting or suggesting the idea that everybody shares all their data all the time. I would say start small, find trusted collaborators, use some of these techniques and opportunities. And as confidence grows and trust grows, hopefully we can achieve this global data sharing. That video is now available in 8 languages. I think there's one more in development. I'm going to switch gears from just GFGH and talk about, for a few minutes, about some of the other global collaborations. Gabriela said I'm the co-chair of the International 100K Cohort Consortium. That is also a sister organization of the Global Genomic Medicine Consortium. And I have a slide on that coming up. But other groups that are particularly interested in genomics, the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization's New Science Council. There is a medical genome initiative that was initiated by Illumina, but has got significant support from healthcare. In Europe, there is the Beyond 1 Million Genomes Project and the Genomic Data Initiative. On the left-hand side, you've got the Common Disease Alliance. This is cohorts, disease-specific cohorts, as opposed to population cohorts. Groups that came up particularly to look at sharing health data during the COVID pandemic. And then organizations like Hugo that have operated separately, but have now reintegrated the Human Variome Project and the Human Genome Variation Society into a single human genome organization, and also the Human Pangenome Project. So a lot of exciting genomic research at the moment in the telomere to telomere world, much more accurate, much more comprehensive look at a human genome, and now a push to make sure that we've got diversity, we've got full representation of all of human genomes as opposed to ones from one part of the planet or another. So a significant number of organizations working internationally. We hope we work collaboratively in the background. So if you join any one of these organizations and you need the benefit of other work, we hope we are communicating enough with each other and collaborating strongly that you get the benefit of all of these groups rather than just the one you join. I will just take one more slide on the Global Genomic Medicine Collaborative. I'm on the board and treasurer of that one. Underneath the GGMC, we've got the Global Genomic Medicine Consortium, very focused on advancing precision genomic medicine, particularly in low middle income countries. And as a counter to that, the International 100K population cohorts, not selected for disease, long-term follow-up, hugely valuable to the world. And so those are the two consortium that we run underneath the Global Genomic Medicine Collaborative. From those groups of that slide I showed a couple of slides ago, 7 or 8 of them have come together and said, we've each got distinct aspects of our work. Some are focused on professional development, some are focused on education, but all of us tend to look at the idea of genomics policy and ethics and legal social implications of genomics. And it's very similar. So let's find a way of working together to optimize the output from all of these groups rather than duplicating or gapping. So we will, over the next year or so, see this genomics policy forum. These groups will all remain independent, but they will share their work and make sure that we're covering the full gamut of human genomics and as it reaches into healthcare. In terms of GFGH itself and getting involved, we have many, for those 450 active contributors, they fulfill these roles. Some individuals fulfill 2 or 3 of these roles, and we're incredibly grateful to them for that. These are just adopting the technical standards is a great way to get involved. So if you don't have the capacity or the expertise to help develop the standard, just work with people to implement these standards, and doing that alone increases your opportunity to be part of global data sharing. These are our work streams. If you've got the interest, the time, the expertise, please join a work stream. If your institute, your organization wants to become an organizational member, just a simple click on our brand new website. And if you just want a more general update, then subscribe to our newsletter. That is it for me from a presentation. I am happy to take questions from all of you.
Thank you, Peter. That was a fantastic overview, and I think it helps us really move into this broader world and all the potential that is out there, and that collaborations like this can allow. So I don't know, Juan, if you want to pick your questions. People who are in sync can raise their hands.
Gabriela? Hear me?
Sí, escucho perfecto.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Really impressive what you're doing. I actually have a question for you, Gabriela, or for Boris, in terms of in countries like us, or in institutions like us, when we discuss, when one of the things is get involved, adopt our technical capabilities or standards. How far would be our capabilities from the standards that this consortium uses?
Boris, do you want to start?
Hi, everyone. How far are we? So I was having the same question regarding how can we get more involved into this? Because if you think about it, all the other institutions have larger infrastructure and have people dedicated to working the different working streams. So in order for us as University of Desarrollo to get more involved, we should increase basically our computer power and have people dedicated to actually this to focus only on this project. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
I mean, one of the ways that many institutions or organizations have got involved has been through these driver projects. And so you can see that if, just as Genomics Brazil is now, but we started working with BitMed in Brazil for many years, just getting the connection. They built a beacon over their data set. So it was baby steps. It was just one state in Brazil. Over time, now they've got a federated national project, Genomics Brazil. And so it was an easy way to say, now we know each other. this is time we can really get involved. And so I think that's for any country, you're probably trying to build awareness, political support, funding support for genomics in your country. And I think if being part of GA4GH can help build awareness, credibility, we're open to anybody in any way. Come to the plenary meetings, get involved. One person getting involved in one work stream is a way to start. And then as local capacity and funding builds up, form a driver project. Come to us in a couple of years' time and say we now have a genomic medicine project in Chile, and we want it to be part of that, formally part of that GA4GH community. But I would say don't just wait for that to happen. Get 2 or 3 people involved in whatever way makes sense.
So I can share what we've been doing and what we think next steps are. So for one thing, Universidad, Desarrollo, I think, is the only organizational partner at GA4GH from Chile, and became members, I think, in 2019 or so. So that's one thing. So right, our name is there. We, our vice provost for research gets all your emails. They know about you. So the second thing is that we, at least in the Center for Genetics and Genomics, have been using the ethics standards for all our consent processes. And I think we had a discussion, Jose, last year about that we should be doing this for every project that involves human subject in our institution. So we asked the participants if they can share data, and whether they can share it in an aggregate form, or if they were allowing us to use it in an individualized form. So I think that that's part of the culture, at least in the genetics group that's doing human research. We copied your paragraph was word by word, and have introduced it in our conversations and in our consent process. So I think that's been really sort of a good step up for us. The third thing is that following that BIPMED, the Brazilian Initiative of Precision Medicine, we are doing the same now, and I hopefully will be able to launch it by the end of the year. So we have aggregated all the exomes that we have from all our different projects. Boris himself and other people from who know bioinformatics are harmonizing all of this data. So we will have a database of at least exome level variants of Chileans that we hope really to make public using your standards. So we've been sort of teasingly calling it the ChipMed, the Chilean Initiative of Precision Medicine, but we'll think of another name. But listening to what has been going around the world, that really has, and the fact that we use all the beacon data all the time, I think it's made it very clear for us that we can participate even with the little things that we have. And then looking forward, and I don't know if we have anybody from epidemiology here, but we've been working on this virtual cohort, gathering data from existing health records to assess and improve health. Is a big project in our institution, and currently it is virtual only, the existing data, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it would be great if we can again have that all built in data sharing from that at the inception, and then when we hopefully move to the step of collecting biological samples and having genome data, already have that on board.
I think so. What I said is if that last aspect naturally leads towards the international 100K cohort, or if it was a disease cohort and it went, our commitment and responsibility, I think, in the back end, is to make sure the best of GA4GH standards and tools and approaches are being used by these international groups. And so if you could get to our standards and be using them without even knowing you're using them, because they were part of they built the cohort atlas where all that metadata is available. So in one sense, if we've done our job properly, you won't even know you're using GA4GH standards, in the same way that when we use the World Wide Web, most people wouldn't know what standards have been developed by the World Wide Web Consortium or the Internet Engineering Task Force, but we know we use the World Wide Web extensively. So part of success for us is these standards are embedded in everything you do, and you don't have to think about them.
I have another question, sorry. And do you run into a lot of problems, like in country-specific problems in terms of regulations for sharing patient data or genomes or whatever?
Yeah, and a wide range of country approaches. So in some countries, perhaps let's take the Nordic countries as an example, a great tradition of sharing it. They see healthcare as a public good. They've got a single funded system. They the Danish National Genome Library. It's part of their culture to share that data, including leveraging healthcare. In other places, there's great track record and willingness to share research data. Groups like NIH and Wellcome really pushing their funded researchers. You must share. And at the other end, we've got, but in the US, there would be almost no sharing of health data between different healthcare providers. So you can have a country that's very focused on sharing across research and healthcare, ones where research sharing is normal, healthcare data sharing is not at all normal. And then you do have a few countries where sharing is just a very difficult concept. It goes against the grain, both in research and in healthcare. So I usually say to people, if international data sharing is not available for you today, then take these same tools and share locally, share within Santiago, share within Chile. But don't let politics or perspectives say we don't want to do this at all, when really what you've got to live is within that environment. Our regulatory and ethics stuff doesn't try and address all the individual country jurisdiction issues. We try and keep all our stuff at a high level, and then know it will be customized for use in Africa. And South Africa will be different from Uganda, and it will be customized for use in every part of the world. So yes, different issues, different perspectives on data sharing, different readiness. What we hope is if we've done our job properly, everybody can take the core and then adapt it into their environment.
Gabriela?
I wanted to follow up on something that you mentioned briefly, which is public attitudes that you've been collecting information on. I don't know if you can share some of that. What is the public perception? How similar or different it is from researchers or from institutional review boards? And what does it look like around the world?
So I should have looked to see whether that public data set includes Chile. I don't know if it does. You don't think so?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think we've jumped in a little late. But
okay, but I think they're still open to collaborations. And I know what the group who's doing it always wants a local partner. They don't want to be doing research in a country without a local collaborator. So just before we get into public attitudes, and they do vary by country, just to stress, these are not patient attitudes. So typically, if we ask rare disease patients, patient families, cancer patients about sharing data and how they see it, they're almost horrified that we don't share it. For many of them, the fact that other families have to go through the same experience without the benefit of sharing that knowledge is just, for them, it's crazy. They so much want other people to not have to go through the same experience. So typically when we ask patients about willingness to share data, it's in the 80s and 90% level. When it comes to the general public, you get some really interesting approaches. And the range of, yes, I will be willing to share my genomic and health data, typically ranges from 20% to 60%. It varies by country, but it also varies by with who. So people are typically least likely to share with for-profit companies. Second group they're willing to share with more likely is not-for-profit research groups. And the third group is their healthcare professionals and team. So in some countries, 60% want their doctor to be able to share that information, but there might only be 30% would want to share it with industry. And the numbers tend to shift from country to country, but in most cases, that's the hierarchy. Most willing with their medical team, second with academic researchers, third with for-profit researchers. But I do often comment that if the worst case scenario is that 20% of humans are willing to share the genomic and health data, that is orders of magnitude greater than the number of genomes we currently have or could possibly process in the next 5 years. So much as we need to focus on building the trust, we already have a significant number of people who are willing to share their data. When we ask people what is their biggest fear about sharing data, that sharing their genomic data, it's that it could be taken and planted at the scene of a crime. So they're obviously getting their understanding of genomics from CSI and movies, and then it moves into and health things. But we find generally there is a low awareness of the public about genomics. There's a higher awareness of DNA, but even then it is not well established in most countries.
Okay, I don't think there are any more questions from the audience, either here or in Zoom. So please join me in a last round of applause for Dr. Goodhand. Thank you for joining us from afar, and thank Gabriela for putting this, for making this talk happen. Thanks everyone for joining us. Let's hope that you can join us soon here in Santiago. All right.
We look forward to that.
Okay.
That'll be terrific. Yes.
Nada, gracias Gabriela a ti y gracias a todos por venir a esta nueva sesión de nuestros seminarios académicos de la Facultad de Medicina y del ICIM. Muchas gracias. Bye bye, Dr. Goodhand.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you, Peter. That was great.